Sneaker Wars, the story of the battle between Adidas and Puma. When we think about getting sportswear or sports shoes, two of the first brands that come to our minds are Puma and Adidas. These two brands have a rigorous and separate fan base. We all know that the rivalry between Adidas and Puma is strong even today in 2022. Still, most people are unaware of the surprising reality that the creators of these companies were actually brothers. From a poor German family to the founders of the two most famous sports brands, how did two brothers achieve such success? And why did the two brothers become rivals? Stay with us till the end of the video to find out. But before we move ahead, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon to stay tuned. If you do like the video, share it with your friends. When we hear about a feud between brothers, it's not necessarily seen as a good thing. This fight, however, was what made Puma and Adidas possible. Who are these two brothers? They are none other than Adolf and Rudolf Dassler. The origins of Adidas and Puma started when Adolf and Rudolf, the Dassler brothers, began working together making sports shoes in their mother's laundry room. Initially, Adolf started working on his own. He made a living by mending shoes in the city while he tried to launch his company. He started by collecting army waste in the war-torn countryside. Stuff like army helmets and bread pouches provided leather for soles, and he used parachutes to provide silk for slippers. Later on, in 1942, his elder brother Rudolf joined him. Adolf and Rudolf together decided to start their company and name it the Dassler Brothers Shoe Factory. Adi's invention of the spiked shoe was what gave him and Rudolf their popularity. His goal was to create a shoe with spikes so that athletes would perform better. This goal that Adi had caught the eye of Josef Weitzer, the track and field coach for the German Olympic team. And because of Josef's interest in this notion, the two men grew close. Adi's access to German athletes was made possible by Josef, who also served as their introduction to the world of sports. However, it was Lena Radke who won the gold medal in the 800-meter race for the German national team wearing Dassler shoes that really made their shoe factory successful. The Dassler brothers joined the NSDAP in 1933. They also took part in the National Socialist Motor Corps. The Dassler Brothers Shoe Factory was said to be the only shoe business operating during the war. However, they were compelled to cease operations and mobilize their workers to supply anti-tank weaponry in 1943. After the war, the brothers nearly lost everything as their shoe factory was almost destroyed by US forces because it was used to build anti-tank weapons. But they were saved by Adi's wife, who convinced the US forces that they were only a shoe manufacturing company. Despite the fact that the Dassler Shoe Factory started their relationships with the US forces on the wrong foot. Later on, the American workforce became the #1 buyer of Dassler Brothers shoes. But even though the business was a success, the relationship between the brothers was tense because of it. According to one version of the tale, it was because the wives of the brothers couldn't stand one another. Another person claimed that Rudy had a relationship with Adi's wife. There were also rumors of stealing and resentment among them. But one of the main reasons was the troubled times during the war. Adi was drafted in 1940 as the war progressed, but they soon granted him leave since it was determined that his presence at the Dassler Shoe Company was essential. But then Rudolf, who already took part in World War I and was a veteran, was drafted in 1943. Rudolf lost his cool after he heard the news. He believed that his brother was to blame for having him sent to war while Adi was allowed to run the company on his own. And so, Rudolf came up with a scheme to leave his position in Tuschin and go back to the factory to join his brother in business. Rudolf was so determined that he even made it to Herzogenaurach successfully, but the Gestapo eventually detained him. He would remain in prison for the rest of the war, while Adi would run the company. Rudolf was eventually released after the war, but his sentence was still in effect. The American government had started the denazification process to punish Nazi party members. Rudolf was initially detained on suspicion of having ties to the SS's Secret Service. He attempted to argue his case, but Rudolf's testimony was dismissed and his brother's testimony supported their relationship. He spent a further year behind bars as Adolf expanded his influence and took over the company. Adi was identified by the denazification panel in 1946 as a Bellestetter and might have faced jail time as well as his termination from the shoe company's management. Rudolf, who already grew bitter because of the previous events, viewed this as a chance to take control, so he created claims that Adolf was the genius behind the factory's development of weapons, and that he was innocent, and that he would have stopped him if he weren't in a prison camp. Addy contested this verdict and was declared not guilty, reinstating him as the company's leader over Rudolph because the panel did not take Rudolph's input into consideration. The brothers decided to end the company by the end of World War II because they were already so out of step by that time. Even though the glory days of the Dassler Brothers shoes factory came to an end, Adolf and Rudolf Dassler did not quit the shoe business. In fact, they decided to start their own companies. Adolf Dassler decided to call his company Adidas after his own name, Addy for Adolf and Das for Dassler, and Rudolf Dassler named his company Puma. And both of them received formal registration of their company on the 18th of August 1949. Rudolph and Addy let the staff choose which new company they would like to work for during the discussions to split the company. Most of the sales employees chose to accompany Rudolph to the Würzburger Strasse factory because Rudolph had mostly focused on sales and administration, but nearly all of the technicians and those working on product development and production decided to stay with Addy. As a result, Addy ended up with over 2/3 of the workforce. Adidas and Puma entered the market and established themselves as competitors. People in town started glancing at each other's feet to see which brand the other was wearing because the rivalry had gotten so bad. They called it the Village of Bent Necks because of the widespread nature of this occurrence. Puma and Adidas even had fan bases that were split perfectly. The football clubs were also split into two groups, one for players wearing Puma and one for players wearing Adidas. This feud was so serious that Rudolph directed all the handyman that arrived at his house to wear only Puma. The antagonism between the two brothers never subsided. But this was not the only problem that happened. Adidas and Puma literally divided a town into two. Herzogenaurach is divided by the Orach River, and the factories for Puma and Adidas were located in opposite directions. The two major employers there were Puma and Adidas, with at least one member of each family employed by one of them. The families and employees of the two companies avoided interacting with one another. In fact, they even avoided going to the same bars, bakeries, or even barbershops. As long as the Dasslers were in charge, the town rivalry would continue to be antagonistic. But eventually, both Rudolph and Adolf passed away, leaving their sons in charge of the business after their deaths in 1974 and 1978. Even when they passed away in the 1970s, the Dassler brothers were buried at different ends of cemetery grounds. But it is said that the brothers had a private meeting before they died. The meeting was kept a secret from everyone, including their loved ones, their employees, and the community, since it would have been detrimental to their businesses. The Dassler conflict tore Herzogenaurach apart and destroyed the relationships of its residents for about 70 years. After they passed away, the rivalry continued for a few more decades but eventually ended. Adidas and Puma had a friendly soccer match in 2009 to symbolize the end of the rivalry between the two businesses and the community. Even though Puma and Adidas started out as a battle between brothers, both companies ended up being two of the best sportswear brands in the world. Both Adidas and Puma have a net worth of $39.26 billion and $11.46 billion respectively as of June 2022. They have developed into well-international sports brands. Overtaking Puma, Adidas is now the second largest sportswear manufacturer in the world. The Dassler brothers' contribution to the modern sports world is underappreciated. They contributed creativity and encouraged one another to create the best sporting goods available. Which one of these brands do you love? And why do you think this one is better than the other? Let's talk about it all in the comments section below. Don't forget to send this video to all of your sports brand obsessed friends to keep them informed about the news. Save us by the bell until we see you in another amusing video.